So now what kind of motivation is required for practice of the Mahayana? First of all, it's simply not sufficient for the motivation to be very limited or very individualistic, that is to say self-centered. It simply does not suffice. Rather, one needs to broaden one's awareness, one's concern for all sentient beings. This includes sentient beings as limitless as space. Within this context, within this very broad arena or domain of one's concern, then one needs to recognize that all sentient beings are in the midst of suffering, in the midst of discontent, and all of these, without exception, have at some point in the cycle of existence, which is without beginning, all of these have been our own parents, our own mother, our own father. There's not even a single one who has not been, even though in this lifetime we don't necessarily recognize them as such. When the beginning of samsara, or the cycle of existence, all of them have filled this role for us, and because of these very intimate relationships, then each one has shown us great kindness. And so with a sense of gratitude, a sense of indebtedness, and wishing to repay this kindness of all sentient beings, then the motivation to be cultivated for the Mahayana is to aspire to relieve each sentient being, and every sentient being throughout all of space, limitless space, to release each one from all suffering and to bring each one to nirvana, to liberation. So with this motivation then, to relieve all sentient beings from suffering, then one engages in the practice at hand, whether this is engaging in prostration, or doing prayers, or doing mandala offerings, whatever it may be. This should be the motivation for the practice. But in the midst of this, one really wants to discard any kind of a self-centered incentive or motivation for the practice.
또 생존 탐색 그런 것도 먹고 신 탐색도 들어가고 이거도 해주는 거예요. 그래서 생존 탐정을 여자의 제대로 요 말이 탐정라 그런 것 같은 책 때문에 그 얘기는 잘 그냥 지나니 따서 감정 지나가 지나 그때 제거 그래서 그거도 사람들이 어디에 스타트 해볼
So once again, the motivation is as before we engage in the actual practice, then to pause and simply quietly reflect. By means of this practice, I wish to relieve all sentient beings of all suffering. And then engage in the practice, even if simply reciting the Om Mani Padme Hum, recite that, but bearing in mind or bearing this sense of this is for the sake of all sentient beings to alleviate the suffering of the entire world. Now, the motivation by and large is that we wish our own loved ones, the people close to us, friends and family and so forth, we wish them to be happy, but for those people that we maybe hold in resentment or we don't really like, or we take some gladness or satisfaction when they meet with misfortunes, the kind of wishing that they will get the bad end of the stick. But this is an inappropriate motivation for spiritual practice. So what is needed is this totally embracing type of motivation that encompasses all sentient beings without discrimination, so that we practice for the benefit of all, with no bias or prejudice. And so now, with this motivation, then it's up to us to put the teachings, the spiritual teaching, into practice. Now, what is necessary for this, first of all, is belief. That is, one needs to have the belief that the practices are genuine, that they're of worth, that would, how do you say, give one the incentive to actually engage in them. You can call this belief, you can call it a confidence or entrusting oneself to the practice. Just as if one wants to sow a crop, you need soil, you need earth. So in order to engage in spiritual practice, one needs to have this kind of confidence in the teachings in order to proceed. Now, receiving the teachings is the next essential step, and from this, of course, one needs a teacher, and having a proper relationship with the teacher, and trusting oneself to the teacher, and then putting the teachings into practice. It's not enough for the teacher to give a lot of instructions if there is never actually any implementation of the practice. And the Lama can't do that for us. It's up to us to do it for ourselves. Moreover, in our relationship with the spiritual teacher, it's essential eventually to bring the teacher into our own hearts and minds, to really internalize the teacher, to internalize the teaching, and so in a non-dual fashion. If we always look upon the teacher as being totally external, and the teacher is saying do this and do this and do that and don't do this and do this, then it's likely to turn into kind of a confrontational relationship after a while. It could be almost combative, of just always having to follow orders or combat with the Lama as instructions are being given. So this needs to be internalized. Finally, in the practice of Dharma, it's how do you say? This is the essential point to engage in the practice, to make full use of the teachings. For those of us who have devoted ourselves to spiritual practice, many of us have done so at the sacrifice of some worldly or material gain. And so we've made some sacrifice there. Having made that sacrifice, if we then don't really commit ourselves to the practice, then the end result will be that we don't really get anywhere in the world, and we don't really get anywhere in the spiritual practice either. And so it's important to take advantage of the opportunity to really engage in the practice, to internalize it. So this is, in short, the advice of the teachings that Rinpoche would like to share with us this morning, his teachings, or his opinions, if you like, his ponderings. This is what he'd like to offer, and from this point...
그거밖에 탔습니다.
Some time ago, Rinpoche, Gyatso Rinpoche, invited Rinpoche to his monastery, but this was while it was still under construction. And at that time, Rinpoche did not have the opportunity, really didn't have the time to be able to come out, but he promised that upon the completion of the monastery that he would come out then for a visit. And so that accounts for his visit at this time.
나로 완전히 되면 난 상태니 제가 공부했을 때는 국가가 그것도 그것밖에 접속했어요. 방법이 너무 같이 단단히 오다. 아예
That's it. And so then recently, Gyatso Rinpoche got in contact with Rinpoche, our teacher here, and said the monastery is now completed, and so I'm holding you to your previous commitment. Please come now since the monastery is finished. So even on this occasion, Rinpoche has a very, very tight schedule and actually did not have time to come out. He is here, even while he did not have the leisure to be here. But Gyatso Rinpoche was quite insistent. He said, you did make a promise, and so I'm holding it to you. Rinpoche was able to take out of his schedule, and he made an agreement to give what is called a tseku, which is like a life initiation or a life enhancement, and it has various purposes. And that is to bring about, to enhance one's general prosperity, to increase one's lifespan, and generally to aid all of us in our spiritual practice. And so this is what he would like to offer to us this morning. However, in terms of advice, from which he says he doesn't have much to give. And besides this, we have our root lama, who will be leading this center, who is very competent, very skilled in giving advice. So Rinpoche feels that he does not have much to offer beyond that. But nevertheless, I think there will be an opportunity for this. And so there are different forms of human life. There's the form of human life called a fully endowed form of a life of endowment and nature. There is also a human life that is a mere human life, that does not have the rich, full opportunities for spiritual practice. But now we are those who have attained, or we are among those who have attained this fully endowed human life. And this endows us with a very rich and full potential or opportunity for engaging in spiritual practice. So having come across this very rare and precious opportunity, then it's up to us to take full advantage of it by applying ourselves to spiritual practice, and specifically bearing in mind or taking the responsibility for all sentient beings. So there are no sentient beings who do not wish to be free of suffering, even to the tiniest insects. And so bearing all sentient beings in mind, aspiring to relieve all from suffering, then we should engage in our spiritual practice. Now, what is the cause of well-being, the kind of well-being and happiness and satisfaction that we seek? What is the actual cause for this? It's engaging in wholesome action. And what is the cause of the suffering and the misery and the pain that we seek to avoid? This is the unwholesome. Nevertheless, even while we're wishing to be free, to be happy, to experience well-being, we tend to indulge in unwholesome activity, which actually counteracts that for which we're aspiring. So once again, what is the cause of well-being, of the happiness and contentment for which we strive? It is the sublime Dharma. It is the wholesome activity. However, while we strive for this happiness, we don't have a sufficient understanding of the nature of the wholesome, of the actual nature of Dharma. And so it's for this reason that we need to learn about Dharma and to ponder it so that we can put it into practice. Now there are three types of activity. There is the wholesome, there is the unwholesome, and then that which is called the unspecified, that which is neither distinctly wholesome nor unwholesome. Now what is it that determines whether an action falls into one of these three categories, wholesome, unwholesome, or unspecified? What's the crucial factor? It is one's motivation. The nature of one's motivation is determinative. But now this is impossible to judge objectively. That is, as we look upon another person, we can't tell the person's motivation. Even if the action appears to be wholesome, whether or not it is in fact wholesome depends upon that motivation, the person's motivation, which is of course internal. Now, if the motivation, the incentive that motivates our actions, if the motivation itself is wholesome, then the actions that flow from it will also be wholesome. Now, a second category is when the motivation itself is unspecified. That is, it's not particularly wholesome, nor is it unwholesome or harmful. It's just kind of lackadaisical, when it's simply meandering with one's mind. And so with that type of motivation, even if you engage in an action which is ostensibly a dharma activity or a virtuous action, because the mind is simply meandering and does not have a clear virtuous or wholesome motivation to it, therefore the action that you're performing is not in fact a dharma action or a wholesome action. And in fact, I think Rinpoche says a lot of us will find that so much of our dharma practice falls into that category, and when it does, we can't really expect to experience the fruits of genuine dharma practice. Therefore, we need to give a great emphasis, a great concern to cultivating a wholesome and a virtuous, a very worthy motivation. And so now what type of motivation? Well, for those of us who are practicing within the context of the Buddha Dhamma, there are two general avenues of practice that we may follow. One is called the so-called lesser vehicle, the other one's called the greater vehicle, or Hinayana and Mahayana. So what distinguishes these two great vehicles within the context of Buddha Dhamma? Once again, the distinguishing factor is motivation. So now, what is the motivation then that distinguishes a practice of the lesser vehicle? It is the following, and that is, one recognizes that oneself is in suffering, and oneself does not want to be in suffering, wants to engage in spiritual practice in order to emerge from or gain release from suffering, and with that motivation, then engages in practice. That is the motivation of the Hinayana, or the lesser vehicle. Now, in terms of the Mahayana motivation, one can find within this context people who are practicing, and if one would ask, why are you practicing? They say, oh, because I don't want to go to an unfortunate realm of existence in future lives. But if this is the motivation, simply to escape unfortunate rebirth for oneself, then this is not a Mahayana motivation.
Siddhi Oma Om Banzara Guru Prema 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 Siddhi Siddhi Oma Om Banzara Guru Prema 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 Siddhi Om
the object of our refuge, it has different variations according to the 9 vehicles. There are actually different ways of considering the objects of refuge. But putting all that aside and going straight to the point, to cite an example, if we have an enemy who is causing us harm, and we're afraid of that enemy, we're afraid for our life, we would look to someone who could protect us or help us from that enemy, to save us from this fear. So, for example, that way of thinking, when we apply it to the spiritual path, in order to really learn how to accomplish the spiritual path, the Dharma, we need a guide. We need a guide because we've already established the fact that psychic existence is a place of suffering, and we're afraid of psychic existence because in a future lifetime, we don't know where we're going to go. If we have no practice, no awareness, we can be reborn in the lower realms, in the hell realm, animal realm. We have no way of knowing where our next place of rebirth will be. And so we're afraid of that state of not knowing. Yet to only be afraid and have fear is of no benefit. That's just a perception. We need to find an object that has the power, the potency, to actually show us the path and give us true protection. And according to the path of Buddhism, the object is threefold, the 3 precious jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And it is certain that Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha combined have the full potency or strength to show us the path that leads to liberation from the 6 realms of psychic existence. And so, knowing this, placing our hope and our expectation in these 3 jewels only, so that we place ourselves below their protection and their refuge, this is the way that we should view our objects. And all of the enlightened ones, the Buddha's activities are expressed by way of the 3 kayas, the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. For example, there is but one moon in the sky, and if you were to place many different containers of water on the ground, let's say 100 different little containers of water, there will be 100 reflections of the moon in each container. Or if you place just one container, there would also be just one reflection. And so, through this, it helps us to understand the way that the Buddhas express themselves is that really it seems to be different only because of the different needs of sentient beings. And it is for that reason that the different types of emanations or manifestations are expressed. But the actual source of the manifestation is the same. It is not different. It only appears to be different because there are these many different vessels there that are receiving it according to their needs. And so in dependence upon the needs of sentient beings, the three kayas are manifest. And also, too, for example, in Atanka there will be many different images of deities. Yet the essence of the mind of all of them is the same. And so like it is that there's just one moon in the space, but many reflections of the moon all over the earth. So we should clearly understand that the nature of the Buddhas is one, yet all these different emanations are expressed because of the needs of all of the different sentient beings and their various sensibilities.
아니, 아주 추대했다는 거는 드라마다 먹고도 그래서 이게 답장나는 이게 보도 먹고 드라마다 먹고도 근데 알아서는 지금 벌는 돈받은 돈 이제 참잖아. 진짜마다 먹고도 이거 자 거기나 싸움이라 또 탐자고 근데 심장 거 근데 감도 먹고 됐고 근데 욕이야. 벌나 먹까지 맞춰 하는 참잖아. 다시 와라 가도 가시형 잡고는 가도 다 끝나오진 바 내가 저 제대로 말이 나야 맞아. 샘도 지금 가만히 먹고 용도 그래서 그 심정 그 감도 뜨니 이 추대다 근데 답답하다 이 쇼가 됐어.
And likewise, the Dharma is a vast expression of truth. There are so many different volumes of books and scriptures. All of these teachings are necessary because, once again, because of the different elements and needs of sentient beings and their various capacities to understand. Oftentimes we would take note that certain people are interested in peaceful deities, and this is what they want to practice, and others are very attracted to the wrathful emanations, the wrathful deities, when in fact there is really no difference, no significant difference between the two, but the mind of the aspirant is attracted to one or the other because of their particular needs and their particular elements, sensibilities. And so this is the reason that we have these different expressions. And also to mention that the Dharma is brought into the world or is taught according to the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. Although the meaning, the ultimate meaning is the same, the way that it itself is taught or expressed is transmitted on these different levels that correspond to the three kayas. And so sentient beings who are overpowered or overcome by phenomenal existence create different distinctions so that the only way to reach them is through the way that they can be reached. Therefore, the three kayas have come to exist. Now in this particular aeon of time, when the five conflicting emotions or delusions, specifically that of lack of awareness, anger, pride, desire, and jealousy, keep on increasing rather than decreasing, then the need for antidotes or remedies also becomes greater. And therefore, the Dharma becomes more vast. And we have the 6 classes of Tantra that have arisen, which are geared towards the needs of beings and their delusions. The 3 outer Tantric classes of Kriya, Upa, and Yoga. The 3 inner classes of Maha, Anu, and Ati Yoga. And yet, the ultimate point is the same. It's like a medicine. The reason for medicine is the same. But the different types of medicines are different, depending upon the nature of the illness. So if a person is suffering from an imbalance with wind, then their medicine will be specified to that illness. Yet the reason for prescribing the medicine is the same. It's because they're ill. And so like that with Dharma, because we sentient beings basically are suffering from our own ignorance, we need Dharma, yet the type of Dharma that we may need will be different according to our needs and our elements and sensibilities. And so as Holiness is explaining all of this, just in case many of us may wonder, why are there so many different expressions, deities, and paths? Now on the path of secret mantra, in order to be able to enter, engage, and practice, there are three things that we need. There are three aspects to the secret mantra transmission. The first is Wang, or empowerment. The second is Lung, or transmission. And the third is Chi, or commentary. So these three, Wang, Lung, and Chi, empowerment, transmission, and commentary, we must have in order to practice the path of Vajrayana, or secret mantra. And so this is like an introduction to what we're about to receive. As for an explanation of the reasons for receiving empowerment, the other reasons, besides the fact that it's the way to engage on the path of mantra, there are very many reasons. But for example, initially we may think of ourselves as worldly people, as ordinary people. And oftentimes we may think that we really aren't able to practice this profound path, and we're really probably not able to actually obtain Buddhahood or enlightenment. Some of us think this way. But we shouldn't forget that when we speak of all sentient beings, it means that all sentient beings have the Buddha nature, and have the potential to obtain Buddhahood. And the number of sentient beings is limitless. There's no limit to it. And so all of these limitless or numberless sentient beings have this potential. It doesn't matter if they're a lama or a monk or however they appear, we're all equal in that we all have the ability to obtain Buddhahood. And so we shouldn't consider that there are any exceptions just because we're worldly or ordinary or lay men and women. The Dharma is equal for everyone. This universe, this entire external universe and its contents are all produced from causes. And so it is that everything in our phenomenal experience of life arises from a cause. And so when we consider the result it or not, we have to consider if there's a cause for it. And this will prove to us that it is possible, because the potency for that result we already possess, which is the cause itself. There needs to be the cause, or the seed. And that cause is not outside of us, it's within us. Each and every sentient being possesses the Buddha nature. That is the very nature of their mind. It's like the sun in the space. The sun is always in the space. Yet when there are clouds, the sun is covered. So although temporarily, for periods of time, you can't see the sun, you know that the sun is there. You wouldn't say the sun has vanished. The sun is always there, even though it may be temporarily obscured by the covering of clouds. And so similarly, all sentient beings, all living creatures, possess the Buddha nature. In fact, they are of that very nature. The difference between a Buddha, an enlightened being, and a sentient being is then the difference of the sun free from clouds, thus the Buddhas, or the sun covered by clouds, sentient beings, who are overwhelmed by their own confusion, the confusion of their own lack of awareness of their Buddha nature. So they don't see it, they're not aware of it. And that's the only difference. So if we practice Dharma, and we practice Dharma very well, we will come to know the true nature of our mind. There's no doubt about it. And we will be set free from the obscurations that are covering that awareness from our mind just now. In fact, this is something that will be accomplished very easily. We're all set up to accomplish it if we just practice. And this is really the principal reason for practicing Dharma. The principal cause, then, is the nature of our mind, this innate Buddha nature that we possess. Now, since we need to recognize this in receiving the empowerment is bestowed by using different empowerment substances, such as the water in the vase and the empowerment cards, which are images of the deity, the mandala, and so forth. These are all considered to be conditions. For example, if you take a flower, the flower is the result of both cause and conditions. The seed of the flower is the cause, but to just have the seed alone does not necessarily produce the flower, the result. You have to have the conditions, the earth to plant the seed in, the fertilizer, the water, the warmth, and so on. And as a result of all that, you'll get the result of the flower. And so like that, we have our principal cause, our Buddha nature, then we have the empowerment, empowering us to realize that we have the conditions of the different blessed substances that the Lama has blessed, and the Lama also has generated himself as a deity, and through that has blessed the substances so that they're no longer ordinary, and through these conditions, then we'll be able to receive the empowerment with both cause and conditions. Just like if we care for the flower seed and nurture it with the other component parts, the conditions, then the result of a beautiful flower will be experienced. When we consider that our innate nature is that of a Buddha, if we then go on to produce the appropriate conditions to care for that, to bring it out, to let it be manifest, then it will bloom of itself, and we will awaken to realize that nature, like the blooming flower. It will be self-manifest. But is it really so that we have the potential to experience this nature, self-manifest? If we consider the experience known as understanding and realization occurring simultaneously, such as in the case of King Indrabodhi, who was the king of the land of Ugyen in a time long ago. The king Indrabodhi went to the roof of his house on one occasion, and in the eastern direction of space, he saw what appeared to him as a gathering of swans flying through the space. In fact, it was Buddha Shakyamuni and his retinue traveling through the space. But the king wasn't quite sure, and it appeared to be a group of swans. And then someone said, no, it is the Buddha Shakyamuni and his retinue, his disciples, coming through their miraculous abilities. And then immediately the king felt that he needed to invite them to come to his palace. And someone there told him, well, you don't need to call them in an ordinary way, like we would invite one another. But according to the Vinaya, the Buddha and his assembly would be invoked or invited for the noon meal, which is the meal that they would partake of for the day. And there's a specific way to invoke them to come through the Vinaya discipline. And so the king decided that this is exactly what he wanted to do, to prepare the meal and to invite them to come. And so he used those specific words of invitation and prepared himself. They came and he offered the noon meal. And after that, the king asked the Buddha directly, please show me a path which leads to the same state that you yourself have accomplished, to be just like you. Then the Buddha said, well then, you'll need to shave your head and become ordained and give up the kingdom, your family, your children, and all of it. And the king thought to himself, well, if I were to sort of attempt to abandon all of these things now, in the future I'll just be reborn as a fox, desiring it even more. And so he told the Buddha truthfully, this is something that I simply cannot do. Now it should be understood as well that Lord Buddha Shakyamuni, as the supreme Nirmanakaya, and in fact there are many aspects to the Nirmanakaya, or the embodiment of manifestation, as the supreme embodiment of manifestation, he then transformed himself immediately into the Sambhogakaya and bestowed empowerment upon King Indrabodhi at that moment. And in the empowerment, the king realized what is called Tokdrol Dunyan, which was mentioned earlier by His Holiness, which is this experience of a simultaneous understanding and realization, so that liberation occurs in that moment. And the king was liberated in the experience of the empowerment. And so His Holiness has told us this story so that we can understand what an empowerment can be like ultimately, that it's a transference of power and blessing. And probably this has been too long of an explanation, but anyway, this is an idea for understanding the meaning of empowerment.